What's going on, Micro Pigs? Welcome back. Tommy Post here with Micro Pig Off-Road Club, a micro four-wheel drive dedicated group. All right, so I get a lot of questions from guys about how to increase the horsepower on these little FE3 Mazda engines, these little 2-liter guys. Well, it is a low compression engine, so yes, they are not big on horsepower. It's not what they're known for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a tip with you guys today that actually doesn't increase the horsepower, but it does help free some up. And that is going to come in the way of an electric cooling fan. Now, one might ask, how is this going to free up any horsepower? Well, basically, without spinning a manual fan with a clutch, your engine is spinning that, and basically it requires horsepower to turn it. Well, by putting an electric fan in place, it frees some of that up so that your engine is not being bogged down by the spinning of that fan, which really just becomes more laborious once that clutch gets hot. So, here's what we have. Now, I suppose before we get too deep into it, I will also mention that the other great benefit is for guys like me who do a lot of off-roading. If you go in really deep water and the water heads right up into there, right across your radiator, that water and mud hits the fan, it spins, it flings the mud up in the air, it hits the inside of the hood, comes down right on top of your alternator, which none of that is good. So deep water crossings, you really don't want to get a bunch of mud and junk inside of all your electrical components. So that's also a case where having an electric fan really comes in handy. These kits, for starters, mine is just an eBay kit. It's really cheap. This is a 16-inch cooling fan. Doesn't matter what brand you buy. They pretty much all come from the same place. So 16 inches the size that fits really nicely against that radiator. Now you have to go through the steps of breaking it loose from its support brackets here so that you can get that radiator pulled out, at least enough where you can stick the little zip strips through to secure that fan, or take the radiator completely out and do it on the ground like I did. So you'll have to go ahead and either drain out all your coolant or find a way to put it in a bucket and recycle it. So 16-inch fan, you put it right against the face of the radiator. It's got its own shroud. Not as good as the factory shroud, but honestly, I have not had any issues with it cooling sufficiently. So, what I've got is a 30 amp circuit breaker right here. Takes a constant power from the battery to the circuit breaker. And basically, you're going to wire in your relay. You want a relay in place. You don't want to wire direct, and that's because the relay is going to do the work. There's a lot of current that flows through that relay, and if you try to run that current through a direct switch, you could basically just melt your switch, and you don't want that. So it does take an ignition signal, which mine is taken right here from some of the emission controls. We won't tell anybody, but I don't have my fuel evap canister in place anymore, but the power supply that comes from the ignition that would fire those solenoids works fantastic for providing power to my relay. Now, the kit that I originally bought had one of those adjustable thermostat dealies where you could turn it for 160, 180, 190 degrees. I am not a fan. I used it. I didn't like it, and the reason being because once that thing got wet, whether it was with the hose when I was washing things or whether it was a case of throwing a little bit of muddy water against it, they're not sealed. So it's really just, in my opinion, not a reliable thing. So I decided instead to go with a grounding switch. Now this is just a cheap eBay splice in. You cut your radiator hose, put it right in place here, and you've got a thermostat switch right here. Now what that does is it goes to ground. So after you wire your relay, You've got a power supply coming from the ignition signal. You've got a constant power supply that's actually going to be firing up the fan through the relay. The ground is what this guy controls. So if you look close, I don't know if you can see it or not, but see where it says 190F? That one is rated for 190 degrees. There is something wrong with mine. It's actually triggering at about 176 degrees instead of 190, and that's measured with an IR gun. So I'll probably pop that out and try a 200 and see what it has to say. But the idea is you wire the ground from that little screw straight to a body ground, which mine happens to be right there. And then the top side from the sensor is the ground that goes right to the cooling fan, right there, that black one down there. So really, you have no ground going to your fan itself until this reaches temperature and completes the grounding circuit to the body, which is made of, this is aluminum. This aluminum bodied, grounded, splicey thingy dealy right here. So it really just runs off of a ground. Now this system is far better than the adjustable thermostat because you can sling mud, water, and the like all over the thing, and it's still going to read from its internal temperature detection circuit. Is still going to pick up the temperature of the water on the inside, and it's going to ground, completing the circuit and running your 16-inch cheapy cooling fan, which is sitting right there. Well, thank you so much for joining. This is a worthwhile mod for sure, and something you're going to want to consider, especially if you go in the deep water, or let's say you live in a hot climate. But there's one more mod I do recommend. When you come off of your, come on, Tommy. When you come off of this relay right here, usually the brown wire, it's a thinner gauge wire, the brown one that comes off your relay, that is your signal wire. I would actually do what I'm going to do. Take that signal wire and run it all the way up front through a switch so that you can actually shut that off from inside the car. That way, let's say you're running at full temperature, the fan's humming away, but you are about to go through some deep water. Well, you don't want your electric fan running underwater, so you can just simply bypass it by flipping that switch off. And your normal switch can take that signal wire because that's very low voltage. That is not the current that is flowing right to the fan itself. That is just enough to fire the relay. All right, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Again, thank you for liking and subscribing. I greatly appreciate that. Find us on Facebook at Micro Pig Off-Road Club. Let's get this hood closed up. Take that ride that we came here for. Tommy Post out.